Hey everybody, welcome to my live stream for the second to last day of December. Give me just a moment to clean up some stuff here. Also enjoying, my daughter got me a case of Kit Kats for Christmas, so I'm finishing off one of these packages real quick. Hope everybody's doing all right. Professor Pink's Philosophy Channel asks, some apologists insist that Dead Sea Scrolls and Masoretic are identical and show no corruption. Aside from many Dead Sea Scrolls books that weren't canonized with the Masoretic, what's the most significant alterations? Oh, there are a lot. Most of the manuscripts or the verses that are preserved have differences from the Masoretic text in pretty much every verse, like 99 out of 100 verses. And so some of the biggest differences are the book of Jeremiah, which in the ancient Greek translation, the Septuagint, is about 1/6 shorter than in the Masoretic text. And we only have preservation of a handful of passages from Jeremiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but a couple of the manuscripts line up with the Septuagint version, not the Masoretic text version, which suggests to scholars that some of the editions of Jeremiah, if not all the editions of Jeremiah that were in circulation among the Dead Sea Scrolls, were the shorter version. You've also got quite a bit of differences in the books of Samuel and Kings. In fact, there are even some differences in how things are ordered in Samuel and Kings. With the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's an interesting passage. Oh, let me see if I can. There's a passage in Samuel, 1 Samuel 11, where Nachash, the Ammonite, says, I'll make a treaty with you only on the condition that I gouge out the right eye of every one of you and so bring disgrace on all of Israel. And the narrative is kind of choppy, and we don't really know exactly what's going on, and the Septuagint is no help there. But within the Dead Sea Scrolls, there are like 2 or 3 verses where it explains what's going on here. And the only evidence we have that something was missing there, apart from the fact that the narrative is just choppy and doesn't line up right, that Dead Sea Scroll manuscript that preserves those missing verses, that's the only evidence that exists that there was something else there. And most scholars think that that's probably more original, that few verses was lost at some point between that Dead Sea Scroll manuscript and the Septuagint translation, the Masoretic text, all the other versions. Hi, Diane in Dallas. Hope the weather's treating you well. I lived by Frankfurt in the Tollway for a while. Lived in Richardson for a little bit. Lived in a couple different places in and around Dallas. Love Dallas. Remember to plug part 2 of your class. Yes. Absolutely. So earlier this year, I taught the first part of a 2-part online Introduction to Biblical Hebrew class. And all the classes from part 1 are recorded, and they're all available. But part 2 is going to be starting up March 3rd through June 12th. We're going to be recording every Monday and Thursday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And again, all the classes will be recorded, so you can attend live if you want and get some direct interaction, or you can just watch the recordings and learn asynchronously. But you can sign up either for part 2 if you already have a foundation in Biblical Hebrew, if you've already taken part 1. There's also a part 1 and 2 combo package that's available. So if you're interested in learning Biblical Hebrew, this might be a wonderful opportunity for you. Hello in Manitoba, TJ and Michaela. Hope y'all are doing all right. Oh, I see we get some. Libertas, thank you so much for the comment. Appreciate your work and watch all your content. Well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. And I'm glad that my content is valuable to you. Skeptical Solomon asks, hey, Dan, do you have a favorite Bible contradiction that isn't well known? Thanks for everything you do. Thank you so much. That isn't well known. There are a lot of little ones. It's rare that I am aware of one that is not well known, because a lot of apologists try to comprehensively respond to contradictions. But I think, sorry, as you can tell, this is not my normal background. I'm moving stuff out of the way because I'm going to be rearranging my office somewhat. I've got a couple more of these bookshelves that I'm going to use to line this wall because I need more space. And so some things have got to move around. But I didn't know where my tissues went. My favorite will always be Elchanan, the guy who actually, well, not actually, but the first guy they claimed killed Goliath, and his story was probably appropriated by the folks who are writing the David tradition, and so they used the old 5-finger discount and took this guy Goliath, the shaft of whose spear is like a weaver's beam, and said, no, it was this kid David who did it. That's my favorite, and not in small part because of how silly the attempts to make it go away are. Danny, thank you for what you do. Thank you so much, Danny. I appreciate it. Any advice for having a faith-based worldview whilst having a critical scholarship perspective? I would say someone like Pete Enns has a lot more of that kind of advice and is invested in that I don't want to say genre, but that industry. So something like The Sin of Certainty, or The Bible Tells Me So. He's got a new book called Curveball, I think, that's come out. Those are books that are going to have a lot more advice for how to balance those things, or how to navigate faith. And there's another, Carla Kamstra, Rev Carla on TikTok, wrote a book called Deconstructing, and we had her on the podcast, I want to say a couple months ago, to talk about her book. That's because her book is about deconstruction without leaving faith, while maintaining faith. So I think it's a very pastoral kind of counseling book, and Carla's a wonderful person. So I would look to Pete Enns or or Carla Kamstra for advice of that type. I am not good at offering advice on navigating that, just because I completely compartmentalize in what I present on social media. I cut out and leave aside all of the personal belief stuff. So anything that you hear from me on social media is going to be from the perspective of methodological agnosticism, a choice and a decision that I made to approach things that way. Okay. On my Discord, they've noticed that the book pile is gone. The book pile's on the other side now. Jacob Bennett says, I'd like to find a way to get reacquainted with the Bible outside of scholarly resources. Any preachers you'd recommend by chance, or other research resources? Preachers, good grief. I don't really pay a ton of attention to preachers, except for the kinds that I would definitely not recommend because that's kind of my job. So preachers that I appreciate, there are folks who are in the deconstruction field. Brandon Robertson is a wonderful member of the clergy. I mentioned Rev Carla. She's also a clergy member. We've had there's another gentleman. No, I'm forgetting his name. His name is either Daniel or David. He's and I want to say he's a mutual of mine on TikTok. I haven't engaged a ton with him, but I think he does a wonderful job, and he is Scottish. Now I've got to just find. Oh, I'm sorry. These days, every time you open, this is annoying. Every time I open TikTok, audio starts playing. I don't know if you can even hear that. You probably can, or maybe you can. I don't know. What is his name? Sorry, this is radio gold right here, but I don't know what's going on with the audio, so I will come back to that though. Let me, yeah, we'll find that account. And Carl J says he's been enjoying Pete's book, The Bible Tells Me So. It's a wonderful book. Daryl Anderson, thank you so much for the question. Regarding Tim Mackey and the Bible Project, do you view that group as apologetics or scholarly consensus or something else? I don't think it's apologetics because I don't think it's really trying to set out to defend conservative Christian dogmas, but it certainly presupposes them. When you look at their reading scripture series, all the discussions seem to kind of begin from the presupposition of unity, historicity, maybe not inerrancy, maybe not univocality, but certainly historicity and internal unity. They don't really discuss, how some books like Daniel come from a variety of authors and were written, compiled, partly written in the 2nd century BCE. They treat it as something that's much closer to historical, but they don't really defend that. That's just informing their presentation of the data. So I wouldn't call it apologetic, but it's not the scholarly consensus by any stretch of the imagination. It's definitely a Christian dogmatic position, but not nearly as conservative or dogmatic as a lot of ones that you'll see out there. But thank you for a great question. Torque Bow, hey Dan, God bless. I am Catholic, but find you absolutely wonderful in everything you talk about. Well, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for all you do, truly. That means a lot. Thank you. Similar to Danny's question earlier, is there any sort of truth to religion or just lessons? It's a bit of a theological question, but it depends on how you understand truth. There's a saying that, in fact, I could probably give you the exact saying if you give me just a second. But something I am fond of pointing out is that the central question of religion prior to the Reformation and the Enlightenment is your love of God sincere? And then after the Reformation and the Enlightenment, the central question, not the only question, but the central question became, are your propositions true? And so we think of things being true in a very different way from how they did many centuries ago. Give me just 1 second. Yeah, there's this saying, I used to have this memorized from William Cantwell Smith in his book, The Meaning and End of Religion. In 1500, if one asked about a person, and there's some Latin here, adjusne philosophia vera est, this would have meant, is his love of wisdom genuine? Came the Enlightenment, and it meant and means, is his philosophy true? So if you talk about religion as having things that have truth and can lead to social improvement, can improve people, that kind of stuff. Yeah, religion has that kind of stuff in it. If you mean are the supernatural claims true, there are no data that support that for any religion. But I don't think that is unique to religion. That's something that we find in and outside of religion. So the point of view of the methodological positions I take on my channel, I would say depends on what you mean by truth and what particular features of the religion you're asking about. But yeah, theology itself, I wouldn't be able to respond to that really. But thank you for the question and the very kind words. Dan Smith, thank you so much. Hi, Dan. What do you make of the deployment of Isaiah 56, 3 through 6 as an exhortation to homosexuals to remain chaste in expectation of heavenly rewards? Is this a misapplication of the text? Yes, without even looking at it, because nobody had any such idea anywhere near the Hebrew Bible. Isaiah 56. What do we got? Do not let the foreigner join to the Lord. Say, the Lord will surely separate me from his people. Do not let the eunuch say, I'm just a dry tree. For thus saith the Lord, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, who choose the things that please me and hold fast my covenant, I will give in my house and within my walls a monument and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. And then 6 says, and the foreigners who join themselves to the Lord, to minister to him, to love the name of the Lord, and to be his servants, all who keep the Sabbath and do not profane it and hold fast my covenant. Same old. So this has absolutely nothing to do with LGBTQ plus people as we understand those categories today. The eunuchs, it's basically saying people who don't have offspring, it's okay. You don't need offspring. When it talks about a name, a monument and a name, the word for monument is, I'm almost positive it's yad. Let me just look. Yes, it's yad, which literally means hand. And this probably means a standing stone, which would be the place where their soul or their spirit or whatever they imagine to outlive the body would reside. And we have examples of this in near Israel, the Katamua stele, for instance, where Katamua says, I'm Katamua, I made the stele, so much bread, so many ducks, so many bulls sacrificed every year to my soul, which is in this stele. And so the idea being, and so the idea of this passage is, hey, you may not have any offspring who can maintain and curate your ancestral cult so that you have a nice afterlife. But if you keep my Sabbath, then you can have a standing stone. You can have, your presence can be with me in my temple, which will be better than all the sons and daughters in the world. Because, you know, I'm God, so I'm going to have all kinds of priesthood watching after the people whose standing stones, whose monuments are there. And the idea of the name is that as long as your name persisted, your afterlife persisted. Think Disney Pixar's Coco. As long as somebody remembers your name, and as long as it can be pronounced and is pronounced, then you continue to exist in the afterlife. That's what that's about. And trying to reread it as an exhortation to gay folks to live chaste lives is wildly problematic. Because back then they, well, I don't need to get into that whole discussion. Shamgar's Oxcode, hey Dan, riddles seem to be important in ancient stories like with the Sphinx, but they don't seem to matter in ancient Israelite writing aside from Samson's riddle, if it can be called one. It feels more like a Baggins riddle than anything else. Agreed. Is there a reason riddles don't really factor into the Hebrew Bible aside from this one story? Do we have riddles from extra biblical writings in the Levant? Not a whole lot. I think that's kind of a literary creative thing that is more about putting on display one's literary craftsmanship and prowess. And I don't think you have a ton of that going on in the Bible. You have a little bit, but it's more focused on praise. And so there's not really a need to hide things behind riddles. But, you know, you could take parables as a riddle of some kind, since they're supposed to be kind of hiding things from people. But yeah, I was thinking about this earlier today. I think it's funny that so many people treat the Bible like a riddle, as if God is hiding all these facts, and we can figure everything out if we just understand the symbolism and put all the pieces together. And it's kind of taking apocalyptic literature a bit too seriously, and then a bit further than that by treating it all like this grand riddle that we just have to figure out. And there are an awful lot of people out there who are making entire livings and careers off of pretending they've found the key to the riddle. But thank you for a great question. CPO fast forward. Thank you so much for the question. Is Q a consensus view as a source for the Synoptics? If so, is it believed to have been a written or oral tradition? It's believed to have been written. It has been a consensus view. I think it's losing ground now. I don't know if it's still a consensus view. I've got a survey that asks about it that I'm prepping to get sent out. It's been delayed a little bit, but hopefully it gets out within the next few months. And I'll have actual hard numbers to share. But if it is still a consensus, it's losing ground. It's not going to be a consensus for long. But definitely written. But it would have been like a sayings gospel. Thank you so much for the question. What's your thoughts on the Ebionites / Nazarenes? I wish we knew more about them. We don't know a ton, and as with so many early Christian groups, all we have is the pejorative stuff from the winners. So we can't know for sure exactly what they were doing. Any groups today that claim that identity are reconstructed groups that don't have any kind of special insight into what they actually believed. Anciently, but I don't know that we have a ton of data on them. But thank you for the question. I need to look into those groups a little more, though. Hugo, thank you so much for the question. Have you read new stylometric study about the New Testament Christ before Jesus? I've looked into that a little bit. It's not incredibly robust stuff. I think there are some presuppositions that are weighing it down, and I don't think that there's a ton that stylometric analysis can do to reconstruct things prior to the New Testament. But if I'd like to see the folks who are doing that kind of thing put together an argument and get it out there, but I'm not the vehicle for publicizing that or getting that out there, because it's not a specialization of mine, and I'm not particularly convinced by that kind of argument. John Richardson, thank you so much for the question. Have you heard of a scholar named E.W. Bullinger, author of the Companion Bible? It has extensive notes in the margins. Among other controversial studies, he shows that we're 4 crucified with Christ. The name sounds vaguely familiar, but I think that's probably a very old. Yeah, this is somebody who died over a century ago. Yeah, I don't think there's a ton that's going to be convincing about that, but I have not read the Companion Bible for myself, so I can't say I've looked at any of the arguments. But I have a version of it pulled up, so I don't think it has had a significant impact on biblical studies, and it looks pretty complex, at least the way some of these things are presented. I'll have to look through it and see what I think. I have only vaguely heard of Bullinger, but yeah, I don't think that that it's made many waves in the scholarly world. At least no waves that have lasted into this century. Thaddeus, thank you so much for the question. Got my SBL study Bible based on your recommendation. Has anyone ever told you that your vid/work have a positive or negative effect on their faith? Yeah, every day I get comments from folks who say that it has either a positive or a negative effect on their faith. I think the folks who talk about it having a negative effect on their faith are usually the folks who are telling me that my work has helped them leave their faith, or they appreciate that it has helped them deconstruct and it has helped them overcome obstacles in their deconstruction. I get an awful lot of comments from folks who say that it has helped their faith, helped them take the scriptures more seriously, helped them be able to engage the Bible more directly and more sincerely. Mainly people complaining are complaining about how my work is going to have a negative effect on other people's faith. So they say, stop what you're doing because you're going to hurt other people's faiths, not their own. Okay. One of my doggies just got back from getting a haircut. Hey, Bo. Hey. You want to say hi to the people? Oh, that's just a, there you go. Yeah. Oh, gosh. You okay? Did you have a good time? Huh? You like having this jacket on? Your eyes look a little pink. Okay. All right. All right. Sorry, didn't mean to put my gut while I was bent over in the middle of the frame. Jacob asked if you checked out the next quest for the Historical Jesus book yet. Curious to hear your thoughts. I don't have a copy yet. I was gonna try to strong arm the Erdmans folks when I was at SBL to give me a copy. I will probably. I've been meaning to. I was hoping I would run into James Crossley at SBL, but I didn't. But I'll have to reach out to him and see if he wants to come on the podcast to talk about it, because I think it would be a wonderful book to talk about. John Vance, thank you so much for the question. Any thoughts on the scholarship outcomes of the Jesus seminar? At that time, it opened my eyes as to getting at authentic texts. The historical Jesus research has moved well beyond the Jesus seminar. I think most scholars these days would say we can't really know for sure anything. We can't say for sure that any words in the New Testament actually went back to the historical Jesus. So a lot of the criteria that were identified as a part of the Jesus seminar have been complicated or completely deconstructed. So this new book that was mentioned in the previous question by Jacob is talking about kind of a new direction for historical Jesus research. So it was important in its day, but scholarship has moved quite well beyond it. Where's my garbage can? There's my garbage can. But thank you for a great question. And yeah, I hope I'm able to get in touch with James and get him or Sarah Rollins or Chris Keith or one of the folks who contributed to that book on the podcast to talk about it, because I think that'd be a fascinating discussion. I was scrolling through here. Somebody said, come to Dallas for a seminar. Now I don't have my book anymore. Don't have access to my book anymore. But around the time that my book comes out, I will be doing a book signing tour in conjunction with taking the podcast on the road. My podcast co-host and I are going to do some live shows in some of the markets where the publisher would like to do some book signing events. So some of the places that we will be visiting are Dallas is on the list. It was either Dallas or Houston, and apologies to anybody who loves Houston, but I used to live in Dallas and I like Dallas. So Dallas, LA, Atlanta, Chicago, either Portland and or Seattle, maybe, hopefully both. That would be wonderful. Hopefully New York. And then I've had some requests for some smaller places. I have a cousin who runs a bookstore in Clarkdale, Arizona. A lot of my family lived for a long time in Jerome, and we love going down there. So I asked her if she'd enjoy hosting a book signing event for me. and she said she would be ecstatic to do that. So Clarkdale, Arizona, we'll do one there. We'll try to do one somewhere around Nashville, somewhere in that area. I think that would be fun. I would love to do something around DC because I used to live in a place called Gaithersburg / North Potomac. That's where I lived until I was 12/13 years old, and I have not been back since. And I would love to have an excuse to go out there and look around. But yeah, definitely Chicago is at the top of that list for a handful of reasons. So if you know a bookstore, I should talk to, or I should reach out to. Let me know. Will you come to the Midwest at all? I actually, yes, because, well, Midwest, I would have to, where is it? Probably Denver. My brother lives in Lafayette, and there's a bookstore that he loves near his house that I would love to go to. And then there's a bookstore in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming that a friend of mine who used to be a state legislator in Wyoming says I should. She will talk to them about having me out there because it's a wonderful bookstore. So I would yeah, I would love to do that as well. People in Wyoming read. Yes, there are plenty of folks in Wyoming who read, and the rest of them just fight the wind and the snow. Somebody said I'm sure McClellan is happy about this casting, referring to the announcement that Jason Momoa is going to be Lobo. And hell yeah, I'm excited about that casting. I think that's wonderful casting. And it's going to be in a Supergirl movie, so I really look forward to that. Thaddeus, thank you for another question. Favorite Civil War general? Mine's Sherman. I'm not at all related to McClellan. I get that question a lot, but yeah, no, I don't really have a favorite. I think they were. I mean, I can appreciate some of them, like Sherman, but none of them are like. I don't look at any of them and I'm like, wow, that's my guy. I'm not a stan of any Civil War generals. Brian Purcell, thank you so much for the question. What's the scholarly view of First Clement? Very early text written by a leader of the early Christian community. Wasn't as close to canonicity as like the Shepherd of Hermas or the Epistle of Barnabas, but definitely a very influential text. But as far as I know, the consensus is still that it's thought to be authentic in most of it anyway. And to date, late 1st, early 2nd century CE. Please don't make me go back to Chicago. Speaking of superheroes, have you drawn anything lately? No, I haven't. In fact, the desk that I have, it's an L-shaped desk. It's actually drafting table. This part of it actually lifts up and becomes a drafting table, and it's all glass. And I used to have a light that I would put underneath it to make kind of a light box. But I've kind of dismantled most of that functionality. It's just a regular old desk. But one of the things I'm doing is getting rid of this L-shaped desk and then just having a rectangular shaped desk against this wall. And then I'll have bookshelves all along this wall. So I'm having pardon me for leaving that up. I'm having less and less time these days for drawing, unfortunately. I wish I had more time. In 2024, I was hoping I would have more free time, and I ended up filling up my schedule to the point where I was busier now than I was before. So yeah, I played golf maybe twice this year. I don't think I've drawn much at all. My drafting table is folded up in the shed, no room, no time. Yeah, I know how that feels. Yeah, I would love to get back into it, but I've been scratching my itch for art and comics and things like that by going to a lot of cons. I went to Comic-Con in San Diego this year. I went to Dragon Con in Atlanta. I went to FanX in Salt Lake. ToshoCon is another con that's here in Salt Lake Valley, and I've been interacting with a bunch of friends who are comic book artists. So I'm scratching the itch, even if I'm not able to draw much. Libertas says, supporting a Midwest visit, RE previous DOD episode, why such variations on Virginity of Mary et al., e.g. Catholic belief in James? Variation, I don't know about why there's so much variation, because usually when these doctrines get started, they kind of go in a lot of different directions until some kind of authority pulls out the bumpers and says this, you'll go this far and no further, and things tend to get homogenized and standardized. But if you have these groups splintering off in the process, then the authority might not extend to a group that has chased it down into some tangent or something like that. So, yeah, I don't about the perpetual virginity of Mary specifically. I don't know a lot of the research on why such variation, but I think it's an idea that was just kind of percolating for a long time within Christianity, and it was bubbling up to the surface in a lot of different times and places in a lot of different ways before people started hammering down something standardized and official. Austin, thank you so much for the question. Did Jesus clearly name Simon Peter as his successor? Scholarly consensus view. No, I don't think that is the consensus view. I think that is the way that one of the gospel authors tried to present it. But you obviously have competition between like Peter and Paul and the historical Jesus. We don't really have any way of knowing. But whether the author of the Gospel of Matthew thought that Jesus named Peter as a successor or not, Paul really kind of took over and has had significantly more influence. Joe says, I thought I caught something, but thank you for the question, Austin. I thought I caught something in passing in a live stream I couldn't really watch carefully, mentioning H authorship in the Bible. What is this H? A group beyond JEPD, or was I dreaming? H again. So H would be the holiness code, which is a part of P, but is a later kind of constituent group that is considered to be part of the larger P project. But it would have been priestly folks who were extra dogmatic about holiness and purity and things like that, which is why you have in Leviticus a lot of that is H, and you have even they're ratcheting things up more significantly. Roman Vasquez, thank you so much for the question. Are you doing a D over D and book signing near Salt Lake City, Utah? Yes. I think there are probably going to be a few. I'm probably going to go down to a friend's bookstore in Provo. Benchmark Books in Salt Lake Valley has I'm in, I think I know the owner has mentioned to me a couple of times that he'd love to host an event, so I'm sure that'll be on the list. And then there'll probably be one in downtown Salt Lake as well, at least one. So that's the easiest kind of event for me to participate in. So yeah, there will definitely be multiple. And you get the Holiness Code, the Covenant Code, and the Deuteronomistic Code, which are the 3 law collections in the Torah, and some of them, to some degree or another, build on, clarify, or modify the others in places. Yes. Torgbo, thank you for another question. Do you have any other passions? I know you mentioned drawing. I'm a musician. Do you do anything musically or any other creative cool things? So I've got this Martin right here, and I've got an electric guitar that my daughter has confiscated. I goof off on the guitar. I'm not good, but I love to, find some tabs and learn a song or something like that. And then within 6 months, I've forgotten it. So my family is very musically inclined. My parents were in a bluegrass band when I was born. When we lived in Dallas, they would participate in weekly live bluegrass jams where was it? It wasn't Richardson. I think it was on the southern, further south. Oh, now I don't remember the name where they used to go. But, and then when they moved to Arizona, they would go to bluegrass competitions. My dad won a banjo competition at a bluegrass competition in Arizona one time. My brother plays folk / country / bluegrass at least once a week in bars and clubs and things like that in and around Arizona. So they're much better than I am. I love to play golf. I love to draw. I can't remember any other passions that I've had time to pursue other than that, unfortunately. Thank you for the questions. I'll answer this one before I get back to the Patreon. Supreme Scientist, thank you so much. Peace. Peace to you as well. What do you think about the claim that the Bible is a historical document? Certainly there are things in the Bible that are historical, and there's a lot of stuff that's not historical. It's certainly a historical document in the sense that it is an artifact of history. Historical in the sense of historically accurate. It is more so than a lot of ancient texts, and also less so than other ancient texts. And in the sense of historical as a genre, no, it's not historical in that sense. The Gospels, I think, are toying with that genre, but are more in the biography, Greco-Roman biography genre than the history genre. So I think there are a few different senses in which something could be a historical document, and there are certainly senses in which the Bible fully or partly is historical, and other senses in which it is not at all. Any advice for learning German? Well, to speak or to read, there are a bunch of great books on academic German and reading German that you can pick up. In fact, I've got Coles and Dodd, Reading German, a course book and reference grammar, German Demystified. This is the one that they told us to get when I took a German reading course in Oxford. Modern Theological German, a reader. So this presents passages in German with some vocab help and some questions. April Wilson's German Quickly, a grammar for reading German. But as I say with people I'm teaching Greek or Hebrew to, reading out loud a little bit every day is the key. If you can't immerse yourself and be within a German-speaking community, the best you can do, I think, is read out loud from text every day. So you're training your ear, you're training yourself to hear and recognize and understand correct grammar and pronunciation and stuff like that. So I would say that's probably the best advice I could offer. Austin, thank you so much for the question. Also, what scholarly consensus, fourth declension plural, have been reached about the historical Jesus? What are your personal scholarly views? I think the consensus is that there was an itinerant apocalyptic preacher named Jesus who was from Nazareth and who probably caught the ire of Rome after causing a disturbance in the temple around the time of the Passover and was executed by crucifixion for his troubles. I think those things pretty much everybody is more or less in agreement on. And beyond that, I don't think you have much agreement. Oh, and also German in review. That's for folks who have learned German in the past and forgot it and need to come back to it. So that's also somewhat helpful. Thank you for the question, Austin. And somebody posts in the I always forget what this thing is called. What is it called? Discord. Somebody posted in the Discord a top secret GIF. And if you don't know what top secret is, that is one of Val Kilmer's better films, in my opinion. Yeah. Gwaine Black, thank you so much for the question. There is a YouTuber that debate any adult that calls in that Jesus never fulfilled a single prophecy, saying he wasn't a real king or what they are referring to was not a prophecy. I think there's an awful lot of truth to that. I think there are a lot of things that are presented as prophecies about the Messiah in the New Testament that may have been popularly interpreted as prophecies in that time period within Greco-Roman Judaism, but were not written as prophecies in the Hebrew Bible. Psalm 22 is a good example, for instance. Isaiah 7:14. Suddenly I'm having a brain fart. 7:12. Yeah, 7:14. I don't know why suddenly I was like, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, 7:14. There are a bunch of things that are reinterpreted as prophecies, so we're not intended by the authors to be prophecies, or we're not applicable at all to Jesus. And then there are a lot of other ways that the stories about Jesus are being told decades after his death by folks who want to make them sound like they're fulfilling prophecy. So there's nothing that we can say that was a prophecy that pre-existed Jesus. We can know for certain that Jesus actually did that. Therefore, that actually fulfills prophecy. There's nothing where that's certain. There's nothing where that's even probable. I would say there are very few places where that's even a plausibility. So when it comes to things where we can say, yes, that was something that Jesus fulfilled, that was prophecy, I think that's a big old goose egg. So I would have to agree in large part with that individual. Flieger, maybe on Lufthansa. Vielleicht. When I first got into critical biblical scholarship, I recall hearing, I think, Dennis MacDonald putting forth the claim that James and John were a play on the Dioscuri, sons of Zeus and sons of thunder. Is this a fringe theory or is there some scholarly support for it? I think that the idea that there might have been kind of a secondary resonance with that is not out of the question. But Dennis, as far as I know, I have not looked incredibly deeply into all of his scholarship. I think goes well beyond where the scholarly consensus is willing to go regarding what is being quoted from, what is being alluded to, what is being adapted within the Gospels. Now, I have one of my old professors, Jim Scott, has written a lot on the influence of Greek literature on the way the Gospels tell their story. So it's certainly a part of it, but I think Dennis goes further than where most scholars go, and I am more comfortable in the consensus-y waters when it comes to things like that, where I'm not a specialist and don't do my own scholarship on that. Carl J says, speaking of historical, what if the James Ossuary had been found during a legitimate archaeological dig? What impact could it have had on biblical studies? I think the impact would not have been significantly different, just because it's not really a bullseye. It's not a smoking gun. I mean, there are an awful lot of scholars who have pointed out there are ways to explain this, even if it was, they were found all together in a controlled archaeological excavation. There are a lot of scholars who would suggest it makes things a little more likely, but not necessarily certain. But yeah, unfortunately, that's not the case. It was not found that way, and there are a lot of people who have brought up significant concerns with the second part of the inscription. And I think regarding things like archaeological artifacts, we need to err on the side of caution when it comes to stuff that doesn't have provenance. Joey Shabadoo, Joey Jojo Junior Shabadoo, I presume. What advice would you give to someone seeking spirituality but struggling to connect with holy books that seem like human creations? I think that there are an awful lot of people who approach the Bible spiritually who recognize all these holy books as human creations, but still use them for inspiration and to connect with their spirituality to some degree. But that's more of a theological question, and I try not to get too deep into that. But certainly there are folks who find spiritual insight and things like that in books that they recognize as human creations. I mean, people get inspired by movies and poetry and things like that. That's the same thing. Connor O'Hare, thank you for the question. What's the story with the naked man in Mark? Some have claimed trafficking. Yeah, that's pretty silly. I think a lot of people today, well, two things. One, there was not just a naked dude there. There was somebody who was wrapped in a cloth of some kind. And when the soldiers showed up, they grabbed him and he took off running and had to leave his cloth behind. So he was denuded by an attempt to apprehend him. And so it wasn't just like somebody was running around la-di-da-di-da, just naked. And also a lot of people, and the reason that is in the story is debated by scholars. But yeah, I think we, I think people would do well to pay closer attention to parts of the Bible where there are people who are nude for a long time. Isaiah was supposed to have been prophesying in the nude for more than a year. And a lot of people were, one way to humiliate captives was to march them around in the nude. So our relationship to nudity today is significantly different from how nudity was treated in the ancient world. And this is just a literary creation as well that is getting misrepresented by some scholars who want to make this into something salacious. But thank you for the question. Robert J. Miller's Helping Jesus Fulfill Prophecy is a great resource for that. Alpha Centurion, thank you so much for the super chat. Do you think there is any point in debating / dialoguing with popular call-in shows when the hosts don't even know the arguments? They've just memorized apologetics. I myself don't buy into debating as particularly useful, just because it strikes me as purely performative, and it has more to do with these rhetorical slam dunks that people have. But if I'm in a position where somebody else can just make something up and say like, oh, well, there was this artifact. It's like, I know absolutely nothing about that. I've never heard of that. And it might be because it doesn't exist. But if they can be like, oh, no, that's a real artifact or that's a real inscription or something like that, and I don't have an opportunity to go fact check, and, then it's just about scoring points and it's performative. And I don't see a point to that. Dialoguing, that's a different story. But dialoguing with a dialogue partner who's not informed enough to be able to engage competently, yeah, I don't think there's much of a point to that. But if it's somebody who is not there to challenge so much as to just try to tease out a story or tease out more information, yeah, I think that's valuable. But that's different from debating. Mike, thank you so much for the question. I've learned from watching your channel that many of my religious beliefs are dogma. How do you square up your own faith while staying true to the data? And that's another question that I'm afraid is outside the boundaries of my channel. I don't talk about my personal faith. I don't talk about how I reconcile it. There are other scholars out there who talk about that kind of stuff. Pete Enns is one I've mentioned a few times. I've also talked about Rev Carla. Brandon Robertson does a great job. There are a lot of folks out there who will talk about that. But I came into faith later in life. I think I've had a rather unique path through faith and education, and I don't want anyone to try to hang on to my words as if I have some insight that applies to anybody other than myself. So I don't want to be responsible for anyone anyone's journey through that, because I just don't want to be responsible for the the repercussions or the consequences, be they good or bad. And so that, in addition to the fact that it would just be a gigantic distraction, and a number of other reasons, are the reasons I have to apologize. But I don't answer those kinds of questions on social media. Derek says, I've heard and read devotional commentary on the parables of the two sons that tries to stress that the detail of the father running to the younger son as he returns to his homestead is important because Middle Eastern men don't run. Where does that trope come from? Oh gosh, I don't know. We have running, back to the tomb. I think running is kind of a literary punctuation mark. I think it is suggesting that emotions are extraordinarily high, but the notion that Middle Eastern men don't run, I don't know where that comes from. That sounds like something somebody extrapolated from observing contemporary culture or something like that. Was D written as a response to P? I happen to think that D came before P. At least D started before P started. I think that D is responding to some of the covenant code for sure. But once you get into D, I think there are parts of D that are later than P. But that's a pretty sticky source critical wicket. But a wonderful book, Thomas Romer's book, the so-called Deuteronomistic History, discusses that to some degree. Regarding the assertions about the meaning of lestes, that's loaned into Rabbinic Hebrew / Aramaic as the word for bandit, which gives us a pretty good idea of what it meant during the 3rd century around about. I doubt there'd be much change. I think the word there, while it can refer to a few different things, I think in the the idea in the 1st century was probably having to do with somebody who's fomenting rebellion, revolution, that kind of stuff, insurrection. That would have been the crime that would have merited crucifixion. And so if that's connected with crucifixion or Jesus, I think that's probably the direction things are going. Avada Kavadra, thank you so much for the question. Any other YouTubers like you? There are a number of folks who have PhDs who do YouTube channels. Jennifer Bird does lives every week. Kip Davis does an awful lot of stuff. Esoterica is another scholar who it's more in philosophy, but engages overwhelmingly with philosophy of religion and things like that. Andrew Mark Henry with Religion for Breakfast. That's a lot broader. It's all kinds of different religions, but Andrew does a wonderful job. And any opinions on how the notion of magic arrived in the Quran / Islam when there is not much of it in the Bible? I think there's a lot of magic in the Bible. It's just not referred to as magic because when we do it, it's not magic. It's only magic when the other does it. But the recent discovery, there have been a lot of videos made about it, about this discovery of a burial where somebody had a little apotropaic amulet around their neck with a little rolled up scroll that was written in Latin, says holy, 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 and Jesus Christ, Son of God, and Saint Titus, and all this kind of stuff. And it's evidence that Christianity had crossed over north of the Alps into modern day Germany much earlier than, well, not much earlier, a century earlier than the scholarly consensus had held. And every time there's some new discovery, they want to say it's the biggest discovery since the Dead Sea Scrolls, changes everything. It doesn't really change much. It just takes that threshold of moving north of the Alps and moves it back another century. But that's magic. That's an apotropaic amulet. That was something that was intended to ward off evil in the person's life and in their afterlife. So there's an awful lot of magic. It's just that we tend not to call it magic when it's us doing it, because we only want to use that kind of pejorative term for the other. P is often considered one of the later parts of the text and even potentially what stitched most of it together. In addition to Romer's book, which I got for Christmas, Conrad Schmidt's Genesis and the Moses Story is a dense but very good text on a lot of those issues. Yeah, Schmidt's book, 2010-ish. It is very dense, but a wonderful discussion. Thanks. Derek says, I'm sure it's some retrojection that devotional scholars and writers rapidly spread, like the name of God is breathing. Yeah, that happens a lot. Center Place also does many live streams. Center Place. Somebody mentioned Center Place recently. I don't really know anything. I think I looked them up, but I have not gotten deep into things. I really like Amy Jill Levine's take on the parable of the two sons and Jesus's other parables. Yeah, that would be... I don't know if there's a monograph she's written on that specifically, but she was one of the main editors for the Jewish Annotated New Testament, which is a wonderful discussion. Simone says, unless you're of the Kaufman school or its descendants, Knoll, who convinced Milgram, Baruch Schwartz, Sommer, Baden, etc., Stackert studied under Schwartz, and I'm not sure where he stands on P. He thinks H is exilic, though. I am on this side of the fence, not sure about where H fits in. From what I've seen of Sommer and Baden, I think I tend more toward the Romer school, but I definitely need to read more about their views. I ran into to Thomas at SBL. He said he'd be happy to be on the podcast. So I've got to reach out to him and find an opportunity to invite him on the podcast. Derek of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The one I enjoyed in my more devotional phase was The Prodigal God by Tim Keller. Alpha Centurion, thank you so much for another question. I asked of you, do you believe you are promoting apologetical hermeneutics? Do I think I'm promoting apologetical hermeneutics? I don't think so. I think I'm trying to expose and deconstruct apologetic hermeneutics and advocate for more critical approaches to the text. And thinking critically, and I hope I'm modeling that kind of behavior in the way I present my own approaches to the text, and in the way I take accountability for mistakes and things like that. So no, I don't think I am promoting apologetic hermeneutics. But if anybody is interested in apologetic hermeneutics, a good discussion of them and their motivations and their background is Kenton Sparks' book, God's Word in Human Words. Which is the subtitle, if I recall correctly, is an evangelical appropriation of critical biblical scholarship. But what Sparks does is go through and talk about how evangelicals have been getting it wrong for so long because they're approaching it from an apologetic point of view rather than a critical point of view. So that, I think, is a good discussion. Torquebo, thank you for another question. Less about religion, more about U.S. culture. Do you feel the rise of misinfo / post-truth is dangerous spiritually, interpersonally, and extrapersonally? Yeah, absolutely. I think the spread of misinformation is harmful in a lot of different ways, and it's going to cause a lot of problems within families, within communities. It's going to make a lot of mental health issues worse. It's making a lot of health issues worse all around the country. And it's making the internet more harmful. It's making AI more harmful. I think it's one of the biggest problems we're facing these days because it's so interconnected with all of the other problems that have been around for a long time. Thaddeus, thank you for the question. What is the biggest find since Dead Sea Scrolls? Oh, gosh. Dead Sea Scrolls were 47. I would say, so after the foundation of Israel and then the wars and everything in the 60s and 70s, that's when there was a lot of interest in biblical archaeology. That's when there was now funding for it in Israel, and a lot of funding for it. And so everybody went in and me personally, I happen to think finds like Arad and Kuntilat Ajrud are the biggest finds. I think that, and I'll defend that. Kuntilat Ajrud, Arad, and Kirbet el-Qom, I think, are three of the biggest, because one of the things that they did was show that the presence of Asherah alongside Adonai for pre-exilic Israelites, and that is one of the main catalysts for the reappraisal of the nature of monotheism in early Israel. And so I think that's been one of the things that has gotten the ball rolling on all this interest in other gods and monotheism. In worship, we now have multiple temples that date to the First Temple period that were very clearly under the purview of Jerusalem authority, but were not the Jerusalem temple. So I think those are probably what I would identify that way. But yeah, there have been a lot of discoveries though, but I don't think any of them. Yeah, because Oxyrhynchus was long before the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, complex question, but I'll stand by that answer. Jay Quinn, thank you so much for the question. And I assume this is my good friend Jay Quinn. Teaching my kids good values in spite of scripture/primary, i.e. Nephi killing Laban. I say murder bad, church says it's good. Rex for teaching youth. That's an interesting one. In the LDS tradition, I don't know that there are a ton that are specifically geared toward youth. However, when it comes to the Bible, there's a new children's storybook Bible that will be released on March 25th called God's Stories. That is an initiative of the Bible for Normal People. So Pete Enns' outfit. And there's something like 60 plus scholars who put together these tellings of the main stories from the Bible in ways that are faithful to the text, but are also informed by contemporary scholarship, contemporary ethical frameworks, and humanism and things like that. So, like I tell the story I was assigned is the story of Jeroboam and Rehoboam, and I make clear, these things are bad, and this is why these folks were doing these things, and whoop. And sometimes stories don't have any any heroes. The stories just have villains, and the lessons you're supposed to learn are what not to do. So that, I think, is going to be a good resource when it comes to teaching the Bible to children, because I hope, at least from what I have seen of it, it tries to package what a lot of scholars, a scholarly approach to the Bible in a way that's accessible to children. And also interesting, and there's wonderful illustrations in the book. But when it comes to LDS stuff, I don't know of anything off the top of my head that's geared toward children. But I'll have to look into that, because I'm sure it's out there. I'm just not aware of it. Carl J says, "Oh, speaking of AI, I love the after party on today's Data Over Dogma with April Joy. Crazy it could never find her book." Yeah, this is something that my co-host Dan told me before we even started recording this interview with April Joy, whose new book, which is no longer right next to me, Star Spangled Jesus, is a wonderful discussion of Christian nationalism. But Dan told me that before the interview, he went to Chat GPT and said, "Hey, what can you tell me about Star Spangled Jesus?" And Chat GPT shared all this stuff, and literally none of it was accurate. And it didn't even get the author right. It just made up some name. And then in the after party, so the Patreon subscribers for Data Over Dogma get an extra 25-ish minutes of Dan and me just goofing off after each episode. And in this one, we actually hopped on Chat GPT and asked it like 5 or 6 times. And every single time it said, they would say, "Oh, it's this author." And we'd say, "Nope, that's not the author." And it'd say, "My apologies, you're correct. It's this author." And we'd say, "Nope, that's still not the author." And every time it was a man's name. And initially it was made up names. And then it was people who were actually authors who never wrote anything remotely approximating Star Spangled Jesus. And it did not get it right once. And I forget how many times we asked it, but yeah, it was a joke. So when people say, "Oh, I asked ChatGPT," I'm like, Thaddeus, thank you for the question. Finally, if not a Bible scholar, what would you do? All through high school and even into college, before I got kicked out, all I wanted to do was either be a comic book artist or a professional golfer. All I did before I went back to school was wait tables, though. So, an honorable profession. I enjoyed a tiny bit of it. I enjoyed a lot of the people that I worked with and a lot of people that I met. I hated the work mainly because management was always a problem. But but if you need a job now, that's one of the easiest ways to get a job. So I'd probably still be waiting tables, honestly, because I was not good enough to be a professional golfer and not disciplined enough to actually commit the time you need to commit to drawing comic books. Oh, is there? Okay, thank you for letting me know that somebody is causing problems in the chat. They have been banned. They were causing problems last time as well. Drake, thank you so much for the question. Trying to get in the head of NT authors. I listened to When God Spoke Greek and just got a copy of Nets today. So that would be the New English translation of the Septuagint. Any non Septuagint resources you would suggest to help me understand these authors? Non Septuagint. There were some like 15 years ago. No, closer to 20 years ago. Ooh. Yeah, 20 years ago there were some books called a people's history. It was either a people's history or a social history of Christianity that looked at early Christians from a sociological perspective that I think gets you into the heads of some of the earliest Christians, not necessarily the authors, though. That's a difficult question. I think if you were to look at something like from the Maccabees to the Mishnah, which is Shia Cohen, it's not, the whole thing is not going to help you get inside the head of an NT author, but I think that will provide some good background. Martin Goodman's Rome and Jerusalem is a good historical discussion that I think will help you get into the head of an NT author a little bit. But the New Testament authors are so very different. E.P. Sanders did a wonderful book on Paul. It's kind of a biography. It's like Paul, his life and writings or something like that. That goes deep into Paul. I think that Paul, the Apostle's life, letters, and thought. That's going to help you get inside the head of at least Paul. I think Sanders' book is wonderful on that. But yeah, apart from early like Greco-Roman period Jewish stuff, I don't know what you might be able to find that would help you get inside the head of an NT author. And yeah, you're gonna kind of have to deal with the Septuagint, but I think you've got two really good resources there. But thank you for the question. Hand of Omega, thank you so much. Phineas/Ezra or Pinchas. Don't mix with others' stance. Sure sounds racist to us today, or at least ethnocentric. But if racism didn't exist back then, what can we can this? I assume you mean what can we call this? I would say ethnocentrism. I shy away from tribalism. I think that has some baggage with it that's unhelpful. But certainly, if ethnocentrism, certainly it's ethnocentrism. I think that's probably if you want to distill it down to one word, I think that's probably the most descriptive. And Joe says that Claude, I guess that's another chatbot or AI or something like that, knows about April's book, but warned me it needs to be careful about making claims about the book because its knowledge cutoff date might affect accurate information. Well, I went into Grok of all things, and Grok was able to give me all accurate information about the book. So if ChatGPT is working with a cutoff date, then that's different from a lot of other chatbots. I guess the mod job is opening. Opening is still posted. Yeah, somebody told me I just need to go to their account, and I can make them a mod. Okay, Simone says I can make you a mod, but that would need to be in the chat. Are you in the chat, Simone? Yes, you are. So let me see what I can do to. Do I need to click on my name? So as soon as I hover over your comment, the whole thing is grayed out. I don't think that I can click on your name. So I don't think that's an option. All right, it's 8:15. It's not a school night, but it is a work night for me. So I think I'm gonna have to call it here, and I think I've gotten to all the questions. Auto start, yeah. Well, I'll have to figure this out for the next time, because I imagine that if some people really want to be here and be annoying, they will have no problem just getting another account. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your support as well, and particularly those who are part of my Patreon community. That was really the foundation of me being able to transition to doing this kind of thing full time, and that's what gave me the confidence to be able to do it. So it means a lot. It's because of y'all that I'm able to do what I can do for a living, and dedicate all of my work time to it. So thank you so much. Hope you all have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you happen to be. Hope you got enough on the table. Hope you've got people around you who love you, and a warm, safe place to spend the night. And I will see y'all later. Bye, everybody.